These right here have quite familiar design, and they aren't an overclocking dream, let's be honest, but these, including 6000 and 6400 MHz, are quite nice pair with the AMD processors. Today we're going to talk about TEAMGROUP T-Force Delta DDR5 RGB RAMs, which are at 2x16 with a kit and 6000 MHz CL28. So this is going to be the lowest latency that I covered regarding DDR5 memories. Shame they're 6000 because I mostly use 6400 MHz in with AMD processors, and with that I could have gone with a better comparison because in that segment it's either 32 or 38 CL when doing benchmarks. These are 6000, but then again CL28, which could be much better in those terms. So regarding that, we have a familiar Delta design when we're talking about diffused LED at the top, our logo here on the side also that lights up, and a familiar shape, I would have to say. Now, both of these, they do come in black and white, so that's something that I need to mention. But when we're talking about some specifications in general, what we have right here are SK Hynix ICs. We have, each stick includes an onboard PMIC, and we have 120-degree wide-angle diffuser on the top, which can synchronize with MSI Mystic Light's Asus Aura Sync, Polychron Sync from ASRock, and Gigabyte RGB Fusion 2.0. Then again, there is no application directly from TEAMGROUP, so if something goes wrong with the actual motherboard software, you can't control them directly. They'll go directly into the RGB spectrum and that kind of stuff. Compared to, for instance, like Kingston Fury Renegade or Beast that are RGB, you have the Fury control that's downloadable from their website or directly from Windows Store. So that's the difference that I do have to mention. Otherwise, well, it works quite nicely with all software, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, they come in various kits. You can buy a single stick from 8, 16, and 32 gigs, and you can buy a dual kit package with 8, 16, 24, 32, and even 48. When we're talking about the clock speed, you have from 5200 to 8000, and when we're talking about CL, from CL28 to CL38. They have a quite nice and regular aluminum heat dissipation solution with a heat spreader. You have support from AMD Expo and Intel XMP, and they both work on AMD motherboard. I'll get to that part later on. We have quality AC on the ECC, and quite interesting lifetime warranty, which you wouldn't expect for RAMs, right? Now, I paired them up with the build that I did yesterday. So if you remember, Deepcool CH260, and we had that B650M mortar motherboard from MSI with 7900 X3D, and they had a certain type of performance, right? So let's deep dive into that to give you some idea. We're talking about AIDA memory benchmark, read speed 76,496, write speed 76,648, and copy is 69,170 megabytes per second. Latency is 72 nanoseconds, so that's really good. When we go and compare Cinebench points, we have average of 10 runs, 26,372. Now, if you remember in that video where I covered the Deepcool AIO and the case, we had Kingston Fury Renegade 2x16 at 6400 MHz. In the same configuration, that ran Cinebench 10 average runs at 26,607. But then again, we have a quite outstanding price. It's around $110 euros, and that's great. Corona 10, we have 9,270,462 rays per second, and in Corona 1.3, 51 second, with 9,353,680 rays per second. I would say this is quite an average on 6,6400 megahertz, and I think that's quite solid. It's somewhere in the middle, and basically I did have 6400 that ran really up high with going above 85 to 90,000 megabytes per second, but regardless of that, I think this is quite solid when we take into consideration the price. Then we go with Indigo. Benchmark bedroom is 3.707 million samples per second, and Supercar is 8.176 million samples per second. And then finally we go with JetStream 2, 287.738 points. So how do these RAMs stack up with everything else? when we take into consideration that the latency is quite lower than comparing it to other DDR5 memories. And then again, read, write, and copy are somewhere in the middle. I would say a bit below average, but the latency is good. And then you take everything into consideration when we take overclocking capabilities and the price. I think that still kind of shortens it up in a good position for buying these, in terms of you have a outstanding price because it's almost by $50 euros cheaper than 6400 megahertz. I'm talking about other brands, not specifically about TEAMGROUP T-Force Delta RGB DDR5, and then you compare it with other stuff with Corona 10, Corona 1.3, which again goes in that average segment. So if you're trying to save some buck and grab still a quite suitable DDR5 memory that goes with AMD, believe me, if you use these for Intel, you won't have much, let's say, performance boost. So you'd rather go with a higher clock speed on Intel processors. But for AMD, sweet spot is 6000, 6400 megahertz, and I think these would still stick quite nicely in that build, depending on the whole configuration. Of course, if you're going with something that is much higher, when we're talking about 9950 X3D or any other processor that is in a higher tier range, you're gonna go with 6400 and try to cap that at maximum, giving you a best performance for your AMD processors. In general, if you're going with something that is something like this, you're most likely going in some mid-tier and trying to save some buck, but still have lifetime warranty, quite solid and good performing RAMs that, well, basically don't stop working in general. So you heard everything basically. The performance is on average, which is quite solid when we take the price into consideration. Timings are quite tight, and I would say that this is good in this scenario. And then again, you don't have a dedicated RGB software, but also it works perfectly fine on any other motherboard software. So in those terms, TEAMGROUP T-Force Delta RGB DDR5 2x16 and 6000 MHz CL28 was in this video, talking about in black version. You have it also in white. You heard all the packages that you could go and combine: clock speed, size, and well, of course, the CL. But yeah, that's it for today. The links for these ones specifically, because if you're aiming for a budget, I'm going to repeat that again. If you're aiming for a budget DDR5, you should definitely go with these ones and not consider the read, write, and the copy speeds, because they will do the job quite nicely in that price segment. And the links, as I stated, are in the description below. If you have something to add to the video or to the RAMs or anything in that particular sense, don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button, click the notification bell, and I'll see you soon in another one. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.